call it to order. So if you want to start the recording, perfect. All right, we'll be calling this meeting to order at 3:16. Welcome, everyone. We have a couple friends who are trying to join the meeting, so they might be joining shortly. And I will be stepping away briefly and coming back on shortly thereafter. So, oh, there we go. So Dr. Ritchie is here. So we'll go ahead and let me pull up the agenda. We'll call the meeting to order, and then attendance. I'll call the roll if you want to keep track there, Karen. Jed Rodriguez, I'm here. Kristen?
Here.
Margaret?
Here.
Sarah? Patrice, we know, is not going to be coming today. Dr. Ritchie?
Here.
Dr. Rowe?
Here.
All right, thank you. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
Oh. So moved.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion on adjustments to the agenda? All right, seeing none, the agenda is approved as written. We'll go into the approval of minutes from October 17th. I will cater a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve, Rowe.
Thank you. Can you share?
Gustafson.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the minutes or edits that need to be done? Catherine Rowe?
Thank you. I believe that Christopher Trombley was on the call and he was part of the public comment. So I wanted to just put that in the minutes.
I don't think we had public comment during our virtual meetings. It's he was in attendance, I believe. He did public comment during our in-person meeting for the board.
He was at the meeting. I had given him the link and he did speak at the meeting. So if you want to classify that as public comment or not, he might not have registered under public comment because he didn't know about the meeting. I sent him the link and he logged in and he did speak at the meeting. So I just, for the minutes, I just wanted to somehow notate that.
Okay, thank you. So noted. All right, any other edits? All right, seeing none, we will approve the minutes with that edit comment there. All right, perfect. Next is our discussion and action on presented language. Do you want to start with the, I'm sorry, do you want to start with the organizer or the batch 4? Kristen.
Let's start with batch 4 and then we can end with the organizer, because since some things have gone through the Legislative and Policy Committee, there's been a little bit more movement.
Right, thank you.
All right, so in batch 4, we're looking at a number of regulations about testing. Would it be possible to make that full screen so it's easier for everyone to see? Okay, so 404 had a ton of revisions because 404 was updated when the law changed in 2016 and then again in 2024. So in 2016, there was the CERT alert about how Praxis 1 was no longer going to be required, except for people who are formally admitted to an EPP. They were going to be taking the Praxis Core instead of Praxis 1. And that would be for, the EPP's placement purposes. So the language about the ACT and the SAT and the GRE and the PAA all kind of became irrelevant in 2016. Now, in the CERT alert for 2016, it has the wording Connecticut State Reading, Writing, and Mathematics Competency Examination prescribed and administered by the board. So since the board doesn't really administer the test, right? We might want to change that. Like I had suggested the wording because it matched with the cert alert, but we might want to fix it to instead of administered by the board, we just say the examination approved by the board. Are there any thoughts on that language change?
So I just want to talk about this just a tiny bit, because I think it's really important when we look at the regs that everyone have a really clear understanding of the historical value of the Praxis Core. The Praxis Core was put into place to really support our underserved community so that we would use it as a diagnostic tool to support them through the program. That's really significant for our CAPE accreditation, how we support retention of high quality, diverse candidates. However, it's not used for placement, right? So it's not a placement, and it's not an admissions or a placement tool. And I think that that's something that, you know, if we're using it as a diagnostic tool, you know, or are we not using it as a diagnostic tool? I think that's something we need to kind of unpack, as opposed to just changing some language there. Because as far as CAPE is concerned, we could use Praxis Core, we can use the SAT, as long as we have a baseline so we could use it as diagnostics. And that's not really what this is saying. Jalen?
Thank you. So the EPP has the ability to use Praxis Core. What this regulation is saying and what the statute says is that Connecticut will no longer use it for certification purposes, meaning we won't be looking for it when we issue a certificate. However, the EPP is free to utilize any type of, you know, pre-entry tests to be able to support students throughout the program.
All right, Julianne?
I'm just curious what change in wording. So this doesn't say, this just says if you're going to be admitted, you need to take either core or another Connecticut, again, reading, writing, again, the SAT, ACT, you need to take that. It doesn't say, or you can't get certified or you can't enroll. It just says anyone who's been admitted shall take. You can take it after you're admitted. You can take it, but it, so I'm wondering what wording you're wanting it to change.
Kristen said that she was looking at the word administered as opposed to, I didn't, Kristen said that.
Approved by.
Yeah,
yeah. Sure.
So here's my question about this. To your point, Julianne, if this Praxis Core was developed or was implemented to support students in a more holistic means to support students through the program, so that we could use it as a diagnostic to remediate any gaps in knowledge, what added value does it have, to your point, to have it at the end of the program, which is what's happening at times when they don't come in with a praxis. So I just, you know, is this something that we absolutely, are we going to continue to do this, to use this? That's my question. And because otherwise, to your point, if it's used the way it's meant to use for diagnostic purposes, then why would someone take it at the end of their program? Or would there be something, if they're successful in their coursework in their final semester and they haven't taken it, do they need to take it? Like, this kind of makes it, this continues
I don't think this is indicating when they should take it. I mean, obviously, since it's supposed to be a diagnostic tool, it makes more sense that they should take it before they enroll or right when they enroll and not at the end of the program. But it doesn't say you have to complete the test before you can graduate. It's just confirming that they do need to have a core test. You know, again, we know it's for diagnostic purposes. What we were changing is that it says it's administered by the board, but the board doesn't administer SAT. The board doesn't administer core. ETS does. So that's why we
Yeah,
want to say
I think-
adopted or approved by. Yeah.
I understand that it's for diagnostic. I understand that. I understand the language. I'm just wondering if this is a practice that, is this something that, okay, Margaret has her hand up. I'm just questioning whether this is going to be something that we're going to continue doing at the state. If we don't have an SAT requirement and we don't have a entrance requirement, and we're not using it as diagnostics, and someone takes it at the end, is there a workaround where someone who transfers into our program and has not taken that Praxis core and is well into their program, is there a workaround? That's my question. Margaret has her hand up.
Margaret. Thank you. Margaret?
Thank you. So I just have a couple of questions because I'm not super familiar with this. It sounds like this data is not going to the State Department of Education for any use, that it is purely diagnostic at the higher ed level, at the EPP. So if that is the case, then does it have to be listed here at all? Isn't that just something that would be good practice at the higher ed? And they determine what they need, and if it's needed for CAPE, they would write that in their policies. I feel like maybe this is not needed here, but it may be my limited understanding of what's in front of me.
Thank you. Lauren?
Yeah, I put the CERT alert in the chat. I know it's hard to like be in a meeting and also read something. I think what's important to note is prior to 2017, individuals could not get certified if they hadn't passed Praxis Core. In 2017, Public Act 1641 changed the language and called it that they still had to take it as a diagnostic tool. That's sort of like where this language is kind of circling around. But prior to 2017, an individual in Connecticut could not get certified to become an educator without having passed Praxis Core. Bodies that wrote this legislation had thoughts about that, changed the wording to say that EPPs in Connecticut still must ensure, because again, I think what's important to note about Praxis Core, it's a basic skills assessment that assesses an individual's ability to read and write and do, you know, sort of basic mathematics. It's kind of comparable to some extent to the SAT. So it's to ensure that EPPs have taken that and then use that information as Dr. Rowe was saying, to perhaps, you know, remediate those skill deficiencies so that they can be successful throughout. So if you're having a larger philosophical conversation about whether or not you want to continue to require that as a diagnostic tool, then that's more than just sort of cleaning up the language. So like if that's something for this group and or the CERT board to think about, do you still want a basic skills assessment at the point of admission into an educator preparation program? And so as you're thinking about you know, the program approval regulations, all of those pieces, like what are the basic competencies that you would want an individual to have prior to becoming admitted into an educator preparation program? And it used to be that you couldn't get admitted into a program if you didn't pass Praxis. It was called Praxis 1 at the time, but 2017 changed that to this diagnostic language. So it may be a larger philosophical conversation about what this CERT board believes about admission into educator preparation programs. You know, that's something for you all to decide. But just to have the context of what used to be, what happened in 2017, and then the practice became expansive, especially during COVID. Some schools went to not requiring the SAT anymore, like to get admitted into a university. So programs still have to think about admission requirements relative to their candidates and what you all want those to be.
Thanks, Lauren. I bring this up because we do not have an entrance exam at the CSCU, number one. And number two, there's so many transfer students coming from CT State and from other schools that by the time they move into their program and then they're juniors, I'm just like to your point, and thank you for eloquently saying it is a larger philosophical question, because yes, if a student comes in, it would be wonderful in their freshman seminar to say, okay, this is something that you can take, and then we can work with them in our praxis study group to make sure that they have the knowledge that they need to be successful in college. But if they're coming in from University of Tampa and they're going into their junior year, that's the philosophical, that's the group that I'm trying to, do we make them go back and say, okay, you did your gen eds and you've done some ed classes. Now you're a junior, but you have to go back and take this basic skills test. So hence my request to kind of unpack this a little.
Thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, I think it's been a really good discussion so far because, like, to your point about the transfer students, right? A transfer student would be a person formally admitted to your board-approved teacher preparation program. And the other tests that they could use would be the SAT, the ACT, the GRE. So maybe they don't have to go back and take core if they already took the SAT or ACT or GRE. But maybe this might be a place where we write in language about what transfer students could do. So we might say something like, each person formally admitted, blah, 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 shall take the praxis core or show evidence that they do praxis core or other examination prescribed and prescribed and approved by the board. Transfer students that have less than 2 years remaining in their EPP will be exempt, or some other thing. Like, what would be reasonable language you think would be able to address transfer students?
Margaret, go ahead. Thank you, Dr. Ritchie, for covering.
I would love for us to not have a bunch of language about trying to get to every scenario and make it very simple and say that every EPP will have a policy that they'll follow about whatever it is, however we want to say this, right? And we can say something as simple as a policy in place to assess essential skill requirements in reading, writing, and mathematics for the purpose of any necessary remediation. And then that way, the higher ed is responsible for following their policy. And if we want to go just one little step further and say including transfer students, in order to call that out, if it would help people feel better, I think we could do that. But I'd really not like to see us get into trying to define every single possible student scenario. I just think that that boxes us in. We have a lot more words, and then modernizing becomes a challenge over time.
I like what Lauren said. Lauren, do you remember the way that you eloquently put that?
No. In terms of, well, I mean, I think you have two different issues. You have undergraduate populations. Don't forget, you also have graduate level programs. You could argue that already having a bachelor's degree is showing that you have, basic competency in reading, writing, and mathematics. But Chris Trombley just put a note in his thing, which I'm trying to read. But I mean, I think it's important to remember what the Praxis Core assessment is. It's a basic skills assessment for reading, writing, and mathematics. Like, that's what that test measures. So if folks, have thinking and belief about ensuring that folks getting admitted into an educator preparation program have demonstrated that in some way, then you have to think about, do you want that way to be one of the assessments, or is there something else? So I think, I don't remember how I said it before.
I think we also have to look at that part. If we're changing to approved by the board, then we need an approval process and whatnot. I feel like this is getting more complex instead of simplifying.
Kristen, go ahead.
I think with the word approved, because the cert alert already specifies, the Praxis Core, the SAT, oh gosh, the lights went out. It already specifies the Praxis Core, SAT or GRE or ACT, that we already have approval by the board for what those tests are. And this was kind of a way of like not listing all the other tests and just keeping it as Praxis Core or other already approved tests.
So do we have a suggestion on the language already?
Well, I don't have a suggestion on the language. I'm just thinking like it's more of a whether or not we're going to require this, we were going to have this requirement. And yes, they could do an SAT or an ACT or a GRE, but what about students that come in and they're doing their initial cert for a graduate program and an MAT? Are we going to ask them to take a Praxis Core, or are we going to, or will they have demonstrated whatever skills that they need for initial certification or for college? I mean, I think that that's another scenario to your point. So it's less prescriptive if we just make it a little bit more general. Julianne has her hand up.
Go ahead, Julianne. Thank you.
I'm just wondering, again, you're talking about, so I think when this was originally written, most of our programs, there were undergraduate programs, and they've moved more and more to graduate programs. And I think for someone who's coming in as an undergraduate, again, the Public Act says that you need to, that the institutions are responsible for doing this diagnosis based on one of these pathways. You may want to say, well, and again, this is a decision as an EPP. If I'm doing a graduate program, the fact that I have a bachelor's degree, can you consider that as verification that they have basic skills in reading, writing, and math? And if that's the case, if you're like, well, I want to keep it for undergrads, but for graduate school, maybe we want another option, you could always say something like for admission to a board-approved graduate teacher preparation program at the graduate level or something like that. Otherwise, I would say just, I don't see any reason to change it other than just getting instead of administered, change it to approved.
Okay. Are there any other suggestions then? Margaret, go ahead.
I just had one more thing where it says, or other Connecticut state reading, writing, math competency exam. It's really not a Connecticut state exam we're talking about, right? I feel like that word is in the wrong place there.
Kristen?
Yeah, that wording was just matching the cert alert. Maybe it's because it's saying that these other tests, so the other tests being the SAT, ACT, and GRE, are already approved by the Connecticut State Board. Like, I think that's why it was worded in that way in the first place. So I think we have two potential ways we can do this. So we can change this language to change administered to approved as one option. We can rewrite it to be closer in language to the 2016, the Public Act 1641, where we would write it as something like each EPP is required to have a policy in place about where each person formally admitted to the program has to take core or other state writing tests, but leaving it to the EPP to make what that policy is for whether or not their EPP is like a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, or if they want to have a policy about transfer students, it would be left up to the EPP. And I can write a sample of that language in the chat when I get a moment. Do we have any other suggestions on what this language could be so we can get to some of the other things?
Doesn't appear that we do. So if we want to move to the next one and then, oh, Dr. Ritchie.
Thank you. I was just thinking, it sounds like this is a deeper conversation or could be a deeper conversation for all of the EPPs. Could we come back to this during the next committee meeting after reaching out to EPPs to get feedback on their suggested ideas? Thank you.
So I suppose the other thing is, let's say we agree on language now, right? It's still going to go to the board as a whole. And since we do give out the materials in advance, all the other EPPs would see it. But if it would help, we could email all the other EPPs. What I would like us to do though is get something I can bring to the board, because if we like then wait until the next meeting, then we're going to push this language to like December. So Julianne says in the chat, should it be shall take the Praxis Core or other reading, writing, and mathematics competency exams approved by the board? And then Margaret says that she can write something. Margaret, would you be able to write it in the chat and we can keep going and then come back to it as the last item?
Yes.
Thank
I
you,
understand
Margaret.
the point about saying it's a Connecticut exam, because it's not a Connecticut exam.
Yeah.
SATs are not Connecticut exams. Core is not a Connecticut exam. So I understand why it would take, because years ago when we first started, there was a content or concept, there was something that was a Connecticut exam, and that's why it said Connecticut exam. So I think you can get rid of Connecticut and just say approved. But again, if you want to further say for graduate level or look for other options, and that's something, because the language just says that the EPP is responsible for this basic skills diagnostic testing of some sort.
Sure. And to kind of speak to what Dr. Ritchie had said, I think if we have something that is massaged into what it is that we would like to present, then at the full board meeting, there's the opportunity to amend yet again the language at that point to finalize anything. So we're just bringing forward to the board kind of a baseline of work that they can then build off of and amend, and all the EPPs would be at that meeting as well as part of that. So I think if Margaret could go ahead and write something up as she is opted into doing, and then we can move on to the next portion and have discussion around that.
All right, so we're at 404B, subject area knowledge. So in this section, it originally listed all these different areas that needed to take a Praxis 2 or Connect or other subject area assessment. So I did notice I have like a little bit of a typo where actful should be underlined and in red, because that wasn't in the original language. I was using actful to replace Connect. And other subject area knowledge assessment as appropriate left it open to be, the Pearson early reading or some of the like early education tests that aren't done as Praxis 2 or Actful. It leaves it open without having to delineate all of them. Someone had the suggestion to remove Praxis 2, so it just says your Praxis, Actful, or other subject area assessment. And then it deleted all the specific ones because some of them, like vocational agriculture, doesn't take a test anymore. And if some of these fall off or some of these get added in the future, we want to be cognizant of keeping these as flexible as possible. So any discussion on 404B?
Doesn't look to be at this time. So do we want to scroll down to professional knowledge then, which has been removed?
Yes. So 404C, the best assessment used to be considered an actual assessment, and team is not. And team is also not going to be required for initial cert, it's required for professional cert. So professional knowledge, this originally said that in order to receive a provisional educator certificate, which is no longer offered, that you need to complete BEST. So it's kind of obsolete in two different ways.
Kaylin?
So team is required under the initial educator certificate. And since we moved away from provisionals, we have our initial and we have our professional. So part of the requirements to advance from initial to professional would be completion of team, 50 months in Connecticut, and verification of a master's degree under the certificate.
Yes, but it
Just
wouldn't
wanted
be a
to-
requirement to get your initial certificate.
Oh, no. Thank you. Yes, it's once you gain employment in a Connecticut public school system. And so therefore, a teacher in an approved non-public school would not be required to do it if they remained in that position.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, I don't see any discussion on that. So do we want to move to 412?
Yes. So the initial educator cert, this one has a ton of stuff in it. And so, okay. In one, we wanted to add a comma, just being picky. So the initial educator certificate shall be issued to any applicant who has met assessment, preparation, and eligibility requirements. And then it goes on to give you some of the pathways you can do that. So A2, the applicant shall hold a bachelor's degree and have completed as part of or in addition to the bachelor's degree program, completed a planned program of preparation in your field. So this is your like traditional EPP route. So anything highlighted in yellow is things that I thought I didn't know if we wanted to discuss. I don't know if we wanted to keep it in. Do we feel like it still should be a requirement for people to have a subject area major?
I think the as appropriate part is the tricky part, right? You know, as elementary ed, probably not because we span all things, right? But when you get to the middle school and the high school, you're more specifically having to, you know, teach to a very specific content subject area. But I'd be interested in hearing other people's thoughts. Sarah?
Yeah, I also thought that keeping it as subject area major as appropriate distinguishes between elementary and secondary. I also wanted to question in the third line, program of preparation in the field and at the grade level. I wondered if that should be at the grade level band for which certification is, because they're bands. You're not getting a certification in a single grade level.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion around that or ideas to add or remove?
Yeah, I think an argument. Sorry, there was just announcements. I think one argument can be made that the subject area major may not need to stay in is like the number of people who do ARC and our second career. So for instance, I know teachers who their major was like in business, but then they teach because they went through the ARC program, they teach math, right? That's not really that's not their subject area. Like it just says they completed a subject area major. It doesn't specify that the subject area major has to be in the field that they're going for. And is there any circumstance where people graduate and don't have a subject area major?
All right, see Lauren, go ahead. I need you to unmute. Sorry.
I just want to note that this piece connects to whatever you decide to do once you get to the endorsement specific requirements. So in the ARC example that you're giving, Kristen, somebody would not be able to be admitted into ARC if they had just been a business major, if they didn't have at least 30 credits in math or have passed the Praxis 2 in math. So it's not, oh, ARC. And when we say ARC, just to be clear, we're meaning the Office of Higher Education's alternate route to certification. That's not the only one. They cannot get admitted with any sort of random major. They would have to either have had Praxis 2 in that subject or 30 credits in that subject if they hadn't been a major as an undergrad. So this concept of the subject area major, I don't know that you can conceptualize it disconnected from what you choose to do for the endorsement specific requirements. And to your point, when we're talking about graduate programs and things like that, you're correct. Nobody can graduate an undergraduate degree with no major whatsoever, but sometimes there are things like general studies majors, right? So so you kind of can actually often graduate without a major. There's also interdisciplinary majors. To Jen's point, when we think about elementary education, sometimes people look at that subject area major as a little bit restrictive. I mean, so I think because Connecticut doesn't allow a major in elementary education, they have to have a major either in an academic content area or an interdisciplinary major. And within that section of the reg, there's specific language relative to that. So I think, you know, it's so hard because we're looking at things one by one, but just note that whatever you do, like if you want to get rid of that line, like maybe it's moot because it'll be addressed in the endorsement specific requirements, but you'll want to think about for all of the endorsement areas, what is the academic content of the discipline that you want those educators to know, and how are you determining that they have it before they become certified?
I think that word as appropriate is what's really helpful right now and provides flexibility based on, you know, the different levels or the different endorsement codes or the interdisciplinary versus, you know, one discipline. So maybe the recommendation at this time to move forward to the board is to keep that in. And then we can, you know, deliberate more should that come up as part of that meeting.
All right, in which case we are on to 412A3. So we can go, so in conditions of issuance, we can go a traditional EPP route as long as you've had a subject area major as appropriate. 3 is you haven't completed a required planned program of preparation, but you've done 20 months of successful teaching or service in your subject. That should look really familiar because that's the legislative proposal that we approved at the last board meeting. So this is the regulatory language that supports the transcript experience pathway. So we show by the transcript that they've taken the coursework. They show their experience by having their employing agent fill out a signed recommendation. I do want to note that it also includes a few other pathways, including you can get your initial certification if you have worked as the state agency or in the professional or managerial staff. So 3A is like your transcript experience pathway. So we'd like that reinstated because that's how many of our applicants get their initial cert.
Julianne?
I just wanted to clarify that when it talks about working in a state agency, so that this experience doesn't waive coursework or testing. This experience is what waives the recommendation. And so working in a state agency, so, you know, we work in a state agency, I can't use my work here in the Bureau of Certification to waive an institutional recommendation for math because I'm not teaching math. But the only time that experience is if you're in a managerial staff, and that usually is for like administration. That's the only time we use that experience. So that's the only time that the state agency experience would play in. It's not applicable, obviously, to math or elementary or so forth.
Thank you.
All right. And the other way you can waive that recommendation from your planned program of preparation is to be serving under the 90-day certificate, right? So you've graduated from ARC, the specific capital A ARC run by the state, and you're serving under this 90-day certificate with ARC, or I believe it's Charter Oak is the other one that does the 90-day certificate. You've met the assessment requirements. You've served successfully under your 90 days. You've done your orientation, and the employing agent says that you've successfully completed your 90 days, and now you get your initial certification.
And this was that conversation that we had around, you know, until those programs change their requirements, that we need this in place. And once they do, or if they do change their requirements, then the 90-day certificate could potentially go away.
Okay. And until then, like the EPP doesn't give the final recommendation for those candidates, the superintendent or the superintendent's designee at the Employing Board of Education says they've successfully completed their 90-day certificate. All right, so 4A. 4 is saying in order to get your initial certificate, you need to have no fewer than 36 clock hours of special education. And it goes into more detail than that. Then A, B, and C are like in what ways you might need to be more specific about this special education clock hours. So I had highlighted A because I had questions about like the specificity. So I didn't know if the applicant who holds this certificate and has completed the application. I'll start over. The applicant who holds certification in one endorsement area, and they're trying to get either reading and language arts consultant, intermediate administration, supervision, superintendent, etc. If they need to complete another 36 hours, or was this certification, this specification really for a different group that I'm thinking of?
Julianne?
So this was included because in anyone who's doing a program in Connecticut, they're going to have that special ed course. That's just part of all of our programs. But you might have someone who completed a program in Montana and they came in through NASDAQ. There never was a course by course evaluation. They got certification without ever having taken that course. And now they want to go on and do an advanced a separate certificate, language arts consultant, admin, superintendent. So those cases, that's when we have to look and say, yes, we need to make sure even if you didn't have it before, you do need to have a special ed course. Maybe you already took one. And if you did, then that's fine. It's met. Then you don't have to take a second one. That's just there for anybody who somehow got as far along as they did, never has no special ed coursework whatsoever. Now they want to move into an admin or so forth, that they should have at least that one course.
Thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, so then my language in red, and to add and completed a planned program of preparation outside of Connecticut, I think I can probably be less prescriptive and saying like maybe in their previous state they didn't do a planned program of preparation, but maybe in their previous state they did, their equivalent of transcript experience pathway. What I basically wanted this to read is so that the CERT department staff don't have to check people who've graduated from Connecticut EPPs. So the language in red I had originally written thinking like, how can I cut down on paperwork for SDE staff so they don't have to check this specific class for all these groups of people. Is there any better way to replace the language in red or is the language in red sufficient?
Julia?
I don't know if I would necessarily say a program outside of Connecticut, because again, a person can hold a certificate, and if they've completed a program outside of Connecticut, now we don't have interstate, we do have enhanced reciprocity, which again waives all the course by course evaluation. But if you say a program outside of Connecticut, as opposed to, I think the point was, if I have a teaching certificate and now I want an admin or a SLP certificate, regardless of where I do that program, I need to have taken a special ed course, whether it was part of my previous program or it's part of my current program. So I don't think you need to distinguish and say outside of Connecticut, because if they did their other program outside of Connecticut and now they're doing a program in Connecticut for admin, if you leave the red language, that's going to mean, okay, now I'm going to enroll at Sacred Heart and I don't need a special ed course, even if I never took one outside of Connecticut. Whereas right now, the EPP is going to say, if you never took one and you're now enrolling in our admin program or SLP, we need to make sure you take that one course.
Catherine? You're muted.
I just wanted to support what Julianne said. I absolutely agree.
So is the suggestion then to remove the writing in red? Okay. Right.
All right, I've written that down. Okay, so 4A, okay, so 4 says to get your initial educator cert, you need 36 clock hours of special education. A specifies, all right, and if you're getting cross-endorsed in one of these areas, you still need to have those 36 clock hours, even if you didn't take it before. B, we want to bring back, because this was one of those that was sunset, so we're bringing it back. B is saying that you meet all the requirements and you don't have this course of special education, that you can have a deficiency for 1 year under an interim educator certificate, which goes into a different regulation that I'm already working on in the future, so that you get the interim educator certificate for 1 year. And then the rest of the initial interim educator certificate language does say that whether that 1 year can be renewed or non-renewed. So I was thinking that B would be important to bring back.
Yeah.
No worries.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just want to repeat myself. I think what's tricky when you're looking at this is you haven't determined the endorsement specific requirements. So the current regulations only call for one class in special education. Some of the thinking that this board has to do around what does a beginning educator need to know, is that something that you're still going to stick with? That it's just this one singular special education course that folks can go through their entire ed prep program, having had just one course in working, with children with special needs? And do you want the language around that special education course to be this same language? Because whatever you put in for here, you're then assuming then that language of this one singular special education course is going to be remaining in that other section of the regulations. And it very well may, but it just as well may not. Like perhaps the board's going to decide, potential educators need 6 credits in special education, or, a course in structured literacy and dyslexia, or whatever the case may be. But I think it's going to be tricky for you to put through this specific language of the 36 clock hours and all of that when you don't know if that's going to remain in the other section.
Thank you, Lauren. I think the other, side to that too is that should we put it in place for the time being, it can always be revisited and the amendments can be made to those regulations as part of the other continuing work. I think the worry is that if we don't have something that moves forward regulatory, then if we don't know how long that process is going to take, and then it might disappear in the meantime, but that there's an opportunity for us to definitely amend them once we go through that process that you're talking about specific to each endorsement area.
Okay, so then we have 4, which says they need to take their special education course. It specifies including in all these special areas where you definitely need a special education course. And B says, you know, if you don't have it done right away for specific reasons, you can get this interim educator certificate. And then C, it says you can is also saying the other way you can get an initial educator certificate if you're in a certification area for which the bachelor's degree is non-required. So that's going to be your vocational technical teachers. In the current language for interim educator cert, they actually have a 1-year interim educator cert that may be reissued for a 2nd year because their certificate didn't require a bachelor's in the first place. It might take them a longer time to get those special education hours. So bringing back C would keep like a longer time to get the special ed coursework done for teachers at vocational technical schools. Five is talking about applicants who previously held a durational shortage area permit, and they weren't required to fill these specific tests. So it's saying that they have to you're serving under your DSAP, you have to finish and pass your subject area assessment in order to obtain your initial educator certificate.
Kristen, would this be another area where it says praxis 2, we would just get rid of the 2 and it would just list praxis?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so then A was all about how, before we go scroll all the way back, 412A was all about how do you get issued your initial educator certificate. B is the duration of the initial educator certificate. So actually, Karen, I know I said scroll back, but it's going to be, you're scrolling down to little b. Thank you. Yeah. So the change that needs to be made here, because the initial educator certificate is obviously no longer 1 year, it is now 10 years. That was part of the Public Act 2441. So it should say, and it might be a little hard to see on your screen. And
I think if you scroll down to where it says B in bold, duration of initial educator certificate, it's towards the bottom of a page. Keep going.
I think it's one up from that. But in any case, to conform to the statute, the initial educator certificate is no longer 1 year, it's 10 years. For B1, I know this language that I added in red sounds chunky and a little bit weird, but that is literally word for word from the Public Act. So it says that you can extend your certificate for 1 year if there's a good cause by the commissioner. If your assessment team reviewing such person's performance asks for this extension. It actually gives 2 ways. You can get an extension if your employer wants one, or if the assessment team reviewing your performance requests one. And the reason I put that in is because it was literally called out in the statute. So I felt like our regulations should reflect that. I'm also not entirely sure what they mean by assessment team.
Kaylin, go ahead.
It's really not. Do you mind just blowing that up? Like I'm struggling. So I was getting a little confused because I can't really see the screen really well. And I think there's been a couple people in the chat that have also requested that. It just, thank you.
I think that's probably good. Better? All right, perfect.
Much better. Thank you so much.
Is there any discussion about, was it B1 that you just said, Kristen? I just want to
Yep,
make sure we're on the right
B1.
place.
Yep.
Okay. All right, not seeing any.
Okay, B2 I removed because an interim initial educator certificate is not, why did I remove this? Sorry, it's been a little while. Actually, I'm not sure that this one needs to be removed, but I am sure someone from SDE can tell me if that should stay or go. The reason I was originally thinking to remove it is that the interim educator certificate, you have that for either 1 or 2 years in order to fix a deficiency, right? Like you're either taking your special education coursework or your US history course or something. And then this is saying that once you are eligible for your initial educator certificate, then you get the 1 year minus the duration of the interim. So does this need to be removed or should it stay?
Kaylin, go ahead.
I was just raising my hand. So technically it really should stay just from our perspective, because when they first get certified, they're issued the interim. They have 1 year, and sometimes VTE have to take up to 9 credits in that year. If for some reason they are unable to, they get another year, which is issued under a non-renewable. But once all coursework is met, we will change the certificate to an initial, and the effective date, the original effective date, will not change. And so we could just leave that in place, because technically a lot of these educators under interims are completing team as well. So they are put in that same category as initial holders.
Thank you, Julianne.
The one thing that's unclear to me is it says, it talking about, 1 year minus the duration. This is like a balance of time, and we don't issue balance of time. Like if you get an interim certificate and a year goes by, then you get renewed for another full year and it becomes a non-renewable interim certificate. So I'm not sure about the language of valid for 1 year minus the duration. I mean,
I just
the
saw
duration
that
of an
ad.
interim certificate is 1 year. So if you issue something that's 1 year minus 1 year, you're not getting anything issued. I think that needs to be fixed.
It would be saying you get issued an initial educator certificate minus your interim. So let's say you took, you're in vocational tech, you took the 2 years to do all your coursework, you're now qualified for initial, it would give you an 8-year initial instead of a 10-year initial.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's
That
correct.
makes
I mean, that's
sense.
how we currently do it now.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
So it's just basically keeping
The
it the
wording is
same.
just odd to me, but okay, I get it. Thanks.
It is.
So I just wanted to take a quick second here. So would we recommend to reinstate this then, return the language? That's the recommendation? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
It is 4:14 and I just, want to honor folks' time. We would need, if they were willing, 4 members to stay on for a little bit longer to get through these particular ones. And to go over the language that I think Margaret was typing up. So would we like to pause here at this D or B2 and go back to the initial one that Margaret had stated? And if any members need to leave, please let us know. But if we can stay on for a little bit longer, maybe we can get through that and move some of this forward to the board. So Margaret put into the chat, so if we scroll back up to the first portion that we were working on there, correct? That was 404. And we were deliberating on what was written in red there, correct? So what Margaret has put into the chat is each person formally admitted to a board-approved educator preparation program shall take the Praxis Core SAT ACT GRE or other reading, writing, and mathematics competency exams or proxy in red or proxy, so added, approved by the board. Successful completion of or more credits from regionally accredited higher education institute shall constitute an approved proxy.
And that has to do with Dr. Rowe's comment about transfers and kind of all the mishmash of folks and trying to figure it out. So if there's a number that people feel comfortable with, or this is something to react to, so folks may say, don't like it at all, take that part out.
Thank you, Margaret. Kristen, go ahead.
I think it's really good. I think we can probably shorten this into one sentence. So instead of saying like listing a proxy and then defining a proxy, I think we can end up putting it in one sentence. But I like the idea of saying, like, if you've already completed 30 credits at an approved accredited higher education program, that would be a good test of whether you have some of these basic skills. Chris asking the chat, is it what we're on the screen we're discussing? We're actually discussing this from the chat. I'm going to repost it because sometimes if you step away, you can't see the chat always. I know that was a problem for Zoom.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kristen. Dr. Rowe, go ahead.
No, I think that Kristen is, thank you, Margaret. This is wonderful. And I do think that we can make it somewhat more concise and not necessarily be more prescriptive on the number of credits, but, you know, where the candidate has demonstrated successful coursework, et cetera, et cetera. I see Lauren has her hand up and I know she's probably got another great idea.
Yep, Lauren, go ahead.
I just wanted
Thank
to add,
you.
there's a precedent when it comes to paraprofessionals, that there's language around paraprofessionals that individuals who don't already hold an associate's degree or 60 credits, they need to take the Parapathway assessment. So if you are looking for a credit amount, you know, that is a model that you could look at because that already exists, like for paraprofessionals, that there's an assessment of their reading and writing and mathematics if they don't have at least 60 credits. So
Kristen, go ahead. Thank you, Lauren.
I was just going to ask you to repeat how many credits because I missed it the first time, but I got it now.
the language, I'll try and find the language and I can put it in the chat for you. It's either an associate's degree or 60 credits.
So are we
Isn't that
looking,
an associate's degree, 60 credits, or passing the Parapro?
Correct, that's what I'm saying. But if you wanted to use an amount of credits in lieu of, you know, an assessment, there's just a model for if you wanted to think about it. That's all I was saying. I'm not saying you should do that necessarily, but there's an existing statewide practice of that for paraprofessionals. So
Kaylin? Thank you.
So this question would really be for Catherine. So Catherine, when you enroll your undergraduate students into your programming, at what point do they take their Praxis core?
They're supposed to take it when they first come in within that
freshmen?
first year, right? That freshman year. Sometimes they don't. As we have widened our catch basin and as we've articulated with CT State, I have more students coming in at the junior level. And that's why I brought this up. I don't know if we want to be so prescriptive to say a number of credits, but I do think that, you know, what to Lauren's point, saying that they do the Praxis Core SAT, ACT, GRE, or other competency assessment, or provide that 60 credits. I think that would be appropriate. Just worried about those students that come in and, you know, they have 30 credits, but they're moving into the second half, you know, the first half of their junior year, and now they're taking this assessment for diagnostics. Remember, this was for diagnostics, right? And it was developed to help students that theoretically didn't have the appropriate education to be able to meet the needs of a college education. So it was for remedial purposes. And so we want to make sure that, to Lauren's point, that they have the skills, but at what point we're writing language that says, okay, they've already demonstrated this in a different way. And I think that we kind of had that when we talked about the parapro. You have that up there.
The language in
I
the
guess-
chat looks great.
Yeah, Kristen just dropped some language in the chat. I'll read it off. It says each person formally admitted to a board-approved educator preparation program shall take the Praxis Core, SAT, ACT, GRE, or other reading, writing, and mathematics competencies exams approved by the board, or successful completion of 60 or more credits from a regionally accredited high school education institution.
Higher
I see some
education. Just a
higher
little typo.
education. Yeah.
Got that,
Okay.
Kristen?
Oh, yes.
All right. Well done. It looks like maybe that would be the language that we can present to the board for them to deliberate on then. All right. We are at 4:22. Would we want to make a motion to amend up until, what part did we stop at? We're on the duration of initial educator certification to move forward, or move the full document forward and allow this additional deliberation to happen at the board meeting for the parts that we did not get to.
I think the remainder is short enough that we could, you know, when this gets brought up at the board, explain that we've discussed in depth all the way up to here. And then for the parts that we didn't get to, say, our ad hoc has moved it forward, knowing that we only have a short piece to go. We're finishing out the professional experience in lieu of student teaching and the durational shortage area permit. So
Sarah?
If we vote on the part that we've completed today, does it, even though we've agreed that this is the way we want it to be, does even the part we vote on will it be reviewed for discussion by the entire board?
So it goes forward to the board and two things can happen, because this actually came up where somebody had asked the question of anyone on the board can review the documents obviously in advance that we've already approved, and they can make a motion during the meeting to approve the recommendations approve the recommendations without discussion. Should the board decide to vote on that and say yes, but if anyone votes saying no, then we would have to go through each one of those items. But it would really be up to the board to make that decision, or someone to motion stating that, approve the recommendations from the ad hoc without discussion, and then we would move on to the next agenda item. So there's two things that could potentially happen as part of the board meeting.
Thanks. I think I'd still like to put a motion forward that we vote to approve what we have completed so far today for discussion at the board, rather than leaving the whole thing to be reviewed by the board on Monday or the 17th.
All right, so we currently have a motion then to move forward with edits for 404, 412. Do we do B as well? Or,
yeah, Jen, I can make a motion if you want.
all right, thank you, Kristen.
Okay. Yeah. So I move that we bring 404 as edited in the chat and 412A and 412A to the Connecticut Educator Preparation and Certification Board as amended in our discussions.
Second.
All right, any discussion on that?
I'm sorry, who was the second, please?
That was Sarah.
Sarah.
That was the second.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no discussion, we will move to a vote. Jen Rodriguez, yes. Kristen,
Yes.
Margaret,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Dr. Ritchie,
Yes.
and Dr. Rowe. Thank you. That was unanimous. All right. The other items we will move to our bi-weekly meeting in 2 weeks then for further discussion by the ad hoc. And we will move this part as well and then revisit the things that we did not get done at our last one at the next board meeting. Kristen did also have an organizer there that she shared. Do you want to speak to that organizer briefly or?
Yeah, this doesn't need to be approved or anything. It's just that someone had requested a sharing a regulation tracker to see all the different regulations that were sunset and their actions so far. So it hasn't been updated since the policy committee meeting last week, but all of the ones that are blue under policy committee have been moved. So they are now on to the State Board of Ed. And they're kind of out of our hands. So you can see that there are a number of remaining regulations for us to review. The next time I see you guys will complete batch 4, but batch 5 is another big batch because it's going to have all of the miscellaneous remaining certs. And I might also have professional language for all the professional certs. So after this, we only have a handful of miscellaneous ones, the professional ones, and then the big lift that I think needs a lot of further discussion at some point is the initial educator requirements for a number of different fields, and there's many.
Would we want to put this as part of our presentation to the board as well, so that they have it?
If we do, it would need to be updated.
Okay.
So I think it might be nice because I know that people on the board and people in public comments have asked if there's some sort of tracker to see where each one is going. So I think it would be nice, but I just can't give you a copy of it edited right now.
Okay. So could we have a motion to get an edited copy that we can then present to the board? Or we can just share via email for the board to review. It doesn't have to be on the agenda necessarily.
I make a motion that we have an edited copy of the tracker to share with the board,
Do we have a second?
the full board.
I second that.
Thank you, Dr. Ritchie. All right. Any discussion? Seeing none, quickly go through for a vote. Jen Rodriguez, yes. Kristen?
Yes.
Margaret?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Dr. Ritchie?
Yes.
And Dr. Rowe?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. I have a quick update on some of the additional work that needs to be done. CPRL has begun the program approval in anticipation because it's a heavy lift of regulations. And what we've done in a previous ad hoc, I think it was 12A or 13B, I can't remember exactly, is for that birth to grade 3, we had voted to have kind of a working group to start crafting some kind of language to bring forward to the board. So I am looking for a motion to have CPRL work with the board EPPs, SDE, and professional education organizations to work on the program approval regulations. Kristen?
Would that vote need to come from our ad hoc or from the board?
It would come from our ad hoc because it's regulations related to the board, so they'll be assisting our regulations group, which is what we did with the other one for the ECE. It was actually Dr. Ritchie who had made that motion for that one because it was directly related to the task of the group. So it would come from the regulations group saying that, you know, we're saying we want another group to assist us with these regulations. Do I have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Ritchie. Any discussion around that, Kristen?
Sorry, I just didn't make that as a motion, so you need someone to make
Oh.
that motion who's a voting member of this ad hoc.
Sorry, my apologies. So the motion again, I need I would cater a motion to have CPRO work with the board EPPs, SDE, and professional education organizations on program approval regulations.
So moved.
Margaret said so moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Rowe.
Dr. Rowe will go with the second for Dr. Rowe. Thank you, Dr. Ritchie. All right, any discussion around that? All right, seeing none, we will do a vote. Jen Rodriguez in favor. Kristen?
Yes.
Okay, Margaret?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Dr. Ritchie?
Yes.
And Dr. Rowe?
Yes. And can we put that planner up, organizer up so that the folks on the call can observe, take a look at it?
Karen, can you pull up the planner that was sent out with the materials really quickly so they can get a look at that? Thank you, Dr. Rowe. We'll let that stand up there for a couple of minutes.
I
You
love
can
a good
expand it.
tracker. Thank you, Kristen.
Oh, this isn't even the latest one.
Hmm.
If you give me 1 second, I can pull up one that's even more updated than this. So give me 1 sec. This was updated on Halloween. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
All right, so this is a sunset regulation tracker. We've gone through many things. Lots of them in green have left our ad hoc committee. CEPCB decision would be if it left our board. Policy committee, they were originally going to go up on the 5th, and they've been reviewed and have moved forward. So the remaining ones are going to be the ones that are all gray and white. Sorry, some of the colors are messed up, but I will work on getting this edited to where we're at now. Towards the end, some of these certificates in italics are ones that weren't set to sunset, but we've identified them as needing to be repealed because they had to do with provisional. So italics were not originally sunset, but should be repealed because we no longer offer provisional. If we later find other items that should be sunset or should be repealed that weren't part of the original sunset, I would put them in italics. So we're on our way. We've got a lot of green. We've still got some gray to go, but that's where we're at right now. I like Chris's idea in the chat to make it linked. That would take me some time, but it could happen.
All right. Thank you very much, Kristen, and thank you for the public for attending and viewing, and for all the collaborative discussion and feedback brought into this work so that we can move things forward to the board. I would cater a motion at this time to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Sarah.
Second.
Second.
Oh, we got 2 seconds. We got Dr. Rowe and Margaret. I think by general consensus that we're all ready to move on. So thank you all. Again, thank you so much for the work and the conversation around this and moving this work forward. And we should have some good stuff for the board to go over yet again. And we're really excited by the LPCD results. They were really happy with what we presented so far. They asked really good clarifying questions. We can't thank enough our SDE members that have been on this call who were also in attendance for that to field some of the questions that were more at the granular level that came up. So we appreciate all of that work involved there. So thank you all so much. And we look forward to seeing you on the 17th and then bi-weekly in 2 weeks for the next regulations meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.